Good morning, everybody. It's Marty, the JavaScript party. Let me make sure that's in the right spot. Oh, man. So I think I blew it. I did not, at some point, I had realized, oh man, I need to um, have a reference to the DOM element, which is unusual in Angular. In Angular, you typically don't need a reference to the DOM element. You use like binding, two-way binding, and things like that to just handle it for you. It's just like, oh, it's magic. That's like kind of like the first thing with Angular JS was like we used to have to write a bunch of boilerplate code to like attach a number to the screen, and then with J like the first thing you'd pull down Angular JS, and then you'd have this two-way binding thing, and it was like, oh my gosh, that just literally saved me 100 lines of code. But so for the most part, the whole point of Angular is that you don't need to worry about like sort of the DOM level things. But you know, the reality is there are circumstances in which you do need it. One of them happens to be if you're trying to interact with ThreeJS, you really do need an actual reference to the DOM element. And so I needed a reference to the Angular component because the Angular component, the piece of memory that's the Angular component, has the DOM element in it, has a reference to the DOM element. And so you need that. So I kind of like organically got there. And now it's like, oh man, I saw I was putting a reference directly on my visualization to the component, and then I realized, oh, I don't want to do this because basically what I said, a risk of a high risk of a memory leak, and I didn't want that. Um, so then what I realized is, um, I need to actually have like a component ID because what was happening is as I was moving through from one view to the other, I was changing visualization IDs, and that's because I was trying to do updates for the component. I'm pretty sure that's why I ended up breaking that. And I basically found that something was broken with end-to-end testing. So that's kind of what's got us down on this rabbit hole. But now I need to build out an entire sort of scheme to track the component ID. And it kind of hit me that this is starting to look a lot like NGRX or other state management applications. And I have tried to implement a few NGRX applications, and I've botched it every time. And now uh, I'm starting to organically get to where those things are. I suspect those things were just kind of ahead of their time for most users. But anyways, Viz component ID. So basically, this I want to basically anytime you create a visualization when the component ID becomes available, I want to attach it to this visualization. That is just a much bigger task than it sounds like because like we don't even a component doesn't even have a way of creating a component ID yet. Like we got all kinds of stuff that has to be done, but probably the very first thing it will be just to get it to transfile. Um, the goal is at this point, like if we were writing a story about this, a ticket or something like that, the goal is to create a visual viz component uh, library, dictionary scheme service that lets me delete and add, delete and add components to it and attach components or be able to attach the component ID to the visualization and be able to get and set that, have like getters and setters and stuff like that. So we got to kind of like the whole foundational thing. We did all that like ahead of time for renderer ID. And then if you go into renderer, you'll see that there's a couple of also things. So we have been going through and removing references and all that. And this is the only one we missed. Now, this is also a good time to sit there and say, oh, okay, so I made an architectural miss. What can I learn from this? And I would say that if I had this to do all over again, I would probably have had a CSS only solution so that I don't even delete and and redraw components. But I think but I have a feeling that that isn't feasible because I think what happens is when you want to change in ThreeJS, sometimes when you want to change something, you actually have to delete the whole scene. Um, and so you have to delete everything and then add a new one in. I think, I'm not sure. So, anyways, we'll see how this plays out over time. But anyways, so the first step is okay, so this is telling me that my interface defines something that is broken in this thing. So, and I'm gonna hold the control button down, hit shift, and uh, um, hit that link. And so basically, we do not have um, um, a viz ID, and we wouldn't, right? The visualization ID, I mean, not the visualization, the component ID um, wouldn't even exist yet. I mean, the component wouldn't exist yet. We're just creating the object that describes that component. So we're going to set that to -1. And that actually might make things a little bit more helpful to other parts of the system to decide, oh, okay, yeah, I don't need to, like maybe the animation will go, oh, the visual ID is -1. I don't need to do anything for this one at this moment. Um, how all those things, how all the timing of like the animations and creations and the things um, like that is going to be very, very difficult for us to ever really have a solid grasp of. Um, all right, so now I guess that's all we needed to do to get it to actually compile. Now we're not actually doing anything because the viz component ID is -1. And this is, so when we go to create a visualization, um, we, hmm, so somewhere we call this, let's see how we, okay, viz component. Oh, okay, so I actually do pass the viz component into it. So we actually do, in fact, have the viz component. That's why I was able to do it. Okay, so when a viz component, okay, so this must be happening in the visualization, I'm assuming. So when I hit add, whatever creates this must call this create visualization. So I actually, the order I was saying was wrong. It looks like I actually create the ST, the visualization, the whole visualization after, probably on like one of the events of the actual viz component being created. So let's see. That's a guess. That is a guess, and that is kind of guess that like if we just go investigate it, we'll have a better understanding of the way the application works. So let's take a step back and go into our components and go to our viz component. See, viz component has its own service. So really the goal at this point that since getting it to compile was, so I guess what I did, I just did, and this is good, right? Because the kind of one of the points of doing this is to figure out the pieces of the puzzle that I just gloss over that have sort of been locked in as muscle memory, and basically that's what makes it almost impossible for me not to have tunnel vision as I move through the process, and B, to teach anyone else how to do this stuff because it's just like, and now we're doing this. Okay, so once I got it to compile, the next problem is my viz component. I need to determine what the viz component ID is, and I don't think the viz component itself has any way of creating an ID. Now we do have a service that we could import and we could say, hey, what's the next available ID and set it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look inside my viz component, um, Angular component, and I'm going to see if the ID, if there's some ID already there. I'm just trying to get the lay of the land, right? Trying to understand what's going on. Um, so we're coming in here, and after viewing it, so I'm guessing that create visualization is somehow tied to the after viewing it. So let's go look at after viewing it. Render element. And no, maybe not. Okay, so maybe it's happening like as a side event of render native element. I bet you it's a side effect of this. That's my guess. So I don't know. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how does this get called and how does it know what the viz component is? And I don't even know if that information is going to be helpful. So basically right now what I'm doing is I'm debugging. I'm trying to just understand how things work. And it's very confusing to a lot of people who don't code because they are like, you wrote that. How do you not know how it works? It's like, well, you drive your car. How do you not know how your engine works? You turn the key. How do you know how key creation doesn't work? It's just kind of the way. So this is that, and then okay, so this actually gets called from within this function down here. So this is, I wish it told the line numbers at this point in here. I wonder why it doesn't. But I'm going to click on this. So create viz for component calls this. It has the render ID. So create viz for component. Let's see where that gets called. All right, so that actually seems to get called in here as well. No? Well, this is, oh yeah, this guy. And this is upsert viz for component. Okay, so upsert viz for component calls this, and let's see what calls upsert viz for component. So this is kind of like for 30 years, I wrote code in this sort of chaining way. Um, I think it's kind of like functional, not exactly functional, but kind of like functional. Um, and I've always had a lot of luck with that. I think I kind of got that from Perl. There was a language called Perl, and it was really good for this kind of thing. Um, I'm working in another environment, like in my job, and we in the C#.net, and it's very, very different mentally. And there, it's like you go, oh, okay, this gets handled by a service, and the service will be over here. Um, See, this I'm sort of just crawling around, stepping through the code, or stepping through the code type of thing. All right, so that gets called over here on this. It would be nice if I could say the line number on line number 113. And then this is called setup visualization. Okay, so this is probably actually being called from the parent of the table itself. I mean, from the actual, like if we look in here, um, let me hit this little button here, and I'll click on this guy. So we have this app viz custom layout, and app viz is the component. And I was trying to figure out, okay, so something along the lines of when this component gets created, knows what this what am I trying to say? Knows what this component app viz component is. And I'm guessing it calls setup DOM upsert. Oop, wrong. Ooh, I don't want to do that. It calls up this setup visualizations, or this probably somehow ends up going back there. Let's just work our way back. It is a stronger way. I'm a little bit better at doing it that way. Um, okay, so that gets called from within here, and that's setup visualization items. So let's see who calls setup visualization items. It is hard though when you get all these layers of abstractions like this. Um, and that gets called from within here. And this is called setup visualizations. 5 months ago, we wrote this function. And this set of visualizations gets called from here with the visualization array. Set up DOM visualizations. And see, that has all of the auto. So if there was more than one, it actually has all the components. So basically, if you want to try to visualize it, there is a component. So let me add another one. There's two of these components. Apparently, the outside component calls this for both of these, but these individually are going to need to know when to create their own, when to use the service. And let's see, it's a service called, I think it's inside of, let's close services, visualization, utilities. I think it's under utilities. Yeah, a sequence. So we have this service that can return the next available sequence number, and it can also delete it too. So we're going to want to create a sequence and delete that sequence when this little guy goes away. Um, so and then that will be our new viz component ID. Um, but I still haven't proven actually. I just got ahead of myself. Oh, it's set up DOM visualizations. And I'm guessing that since this thing actually has access to the components as a query list, that it probably is from the one that's being used outside of this. Yep. So both of these guys actually use it, right? The at custom layout and the tabular layout both call this setup DOM visualization. So basically it calls this and then it attaches it in the tabular layout. I don't think we're going to have to change anything about that because, well, yeah, well, we won't have to change anything about the way that's called, but in here is where we're going to want to, A, okay, there's two things going on here. There's something that needs to happen at the component level, and then there's something that needs to happen in this service. The thing that needs to happen at the component level is it needs to create an ID for itself and then delete its ID and recycle its ID. Um, like that has to happen. It doesn't. It probably won't be able to do everything because whatever is going to manage that ID, something's going to have to keep track of the IDs that I can say, hey, you. Let's see, we already have a pretty nice little architecture here. So let's go to our services. In our services, uh, model 3, is it 3? No, it won't be 3. It'll probably be UI. But everything else, it's kind of models what happens in 3. Um, but it'll probably be in UI, and I already have the UI service, so I suspect this guy actually already has something already has a list of components. But whatever has that list of components needs to have the ID instead, an ID in a dictionary to the component ID instead of the um, STID. And I think I went with an STID because I knew there could never be more than one component. Like we're never going to share a component across STs, I don't think. Um, if we do, that's going to be pretty hard. So anyway, so we have two parallel pieces of work I'm trying to do right now. One, and it doesn't matter which one we do first. We got to do both though. Well, I guess it doesn't matter because I don't want to try to manage all of that stuff without it existing. So I guess the first thing to do is create a component ID. Now we might already be creating a component ID. I don't know. Uh, Pretty sure we're not because we are not pulling in the service. So we can actually create a component ID immediately in a constructor. We do not currently have a constructor though. So I'm going to create a constructor, and constructors have it at the very beginning. And so at the very beginning, I'm going to say, hey, what is my component ID? And I'm going to make it a variable up here, a component class variable. and yeah, component class variable. I guess that's the way. So I'm just gonna say constructor, boom, and then console.log. And then we're just gonna hit the F12 button so we get our. Okay, that was not. Oh no, what did I do? Oh my gosh. I have no idea how to get out of this. What have I done? Oh, so I thought I'd hit the F12. Apparently I did not. I must have hit maybe. Huh? There we go. Kind of. No. I imagine if I hit Alt Tab. Oh, we're almost there. I need my. Oh, it's my browser. For some reason, my browser just thinks it's humongous. It just thinks it's supposed to be humongous. Escape. Nope. I think what I need to do is actually. I probably have no choice but to kill the browser. Kill the browser. Kill the browser. All right. We're bringing that browser back. Bring her back. All right. Now, F12? Okay. All right. Now, when I create one of these, the constructor should fire off hello world, right? So we got our hello world. Now, when we change, what happens is, and this is going to be the weird part, right? When I change views, it will destroy, the parent view gets destroyed and a new view comes in. And so we get another hello world. We change this. And so what we want is, well, to the user, to me and you, it looks like nothing's changed. It has changed. And we need to do that. Old one doesn't even exist anymore. The original component is long gone, or should be long gone anyways. Um, so I need this thing to create its own little service. I mean, I need this thing to use the recyclable ID service to create an ID, right? So what we can do is we could say component ID. And I guess it's ST component ID, right? Component ID. And we're going to say that has to be a number. And we're not going to assign it here, but I believe if I say this, and I don't know this for sure, ST component ID equals 1. Yeah, so it's happy. It was not happy because up here I had um, I'd said that it exists and that it's a number, but then I assigned it to undefined, basically. It's kind of a short way of saying assign this to undefined. So I could have also, and then that would be okay. The and you might need to do that, like if whatever you need to get needs to be in like the after a knit or something like that. You know, but since I'm going to assign it here, I'm good. Now I need the service, and I believe it's called recyclable service, but I can't remember. So I'm going to come over here into my services. I'm trying to get a little bit like less dependent on searching, on doing like searches to do things, just because I'm really good at that. So why continue to do that? But see, I have this recyclable service, and I have a generate an ID function and a recycled ID. And so I want to generate the ID when the service starts. I want it to generate, or when the component is created, and I want to delete the ID when the component is deleted. And there's other things as part of deleting, like I want to delete my references to the component when I delete it. So that's going to be a little bit trickier than I'm implying. But the first step would be to create one. Now, if you're using, I think it's like Angular 16 um, and below, if you're using those, I believe that's it. You have to declare your um, services inside of the constructor, like in the arguments of the constructor. But later on, they came out with this really slick little inject function that does the same thing, and I like it a lot better. Um, I think that was definitely a big win for the Angular team. I don't think that they ever kind of thought that, and I can see why, but like they never guessed that there some components may have dozens of these services, and that does not work very well in the constructor. Um, and it really, like a lot of times, will lead to a lot of um, Git conflicts because a lot of times people want the constructors to only be like the top of the constructor to only be one line. Um, so this dot recyclable sequence dot generate ID. And so now we have an ST component ID. Now, destroy. I want to put a console log here because when I destroy, I see a delete component for ID. See, this whole thing probably needs to be redone. So, yeah, and I need to make sure I don't forget it. So I'm gonna put a console log. Okay. Refactor to delete the component references. And I don't actually know exactly what that means at this point, but what I do want to do is in my console log put this dot st component ID. And here we go. And then when we change, what we expect to happen is that delete thing to happen. Refactor delete component ID 8. So this component has the ID of 8 right now. And then if I change views again, now it has the ID of 11. So I think that's good enough for today. I got to figure out what the dogs are barking at. Happy coding, everybody. Bye.